real background, we're up in the mountains just 2 hours north of New York City. If you've ever seen the movie Dirty Dancing, which I highly recommend, it's a great 80s movie. It takes place up here. So yeah, thank you for having me, and good morning to people in the US and good evening to everybody in India. I'm so excited to talk about this because this is actually my first time really talking about sort of leadership and what it means. And it's a lot of questions that I get around my career or around, what does this thing mean? Like, what does it mean to be, to move from being a software developer into a leadership position? And how do you make that transition? So just about myself, it only dawned on me when writing this. I've been leading teams for 15 years, which is a long time. And it's not 300, only 100. Only it's a lot of people and a lot of responsibility. But yeah, so Rent the Runway, I'm VP of engineering, and I have teams both in our Irish office and in New York City, though everybody's pretty much remote at this point. And my career has been around leading teams, but kind of in a whole other thread. Yeah, I'm the creator of Sass and Haml. Both of them were sort of first in their categories. And Haml is a very interesting language. It's not as popular as it used to be, but Sass at this point is now pretty much officially sponsored by Google. We have teams at Microsoft who are sponsoring it, and so it's a big thing now. And I used to work for the Wikimedia Foundation also and ran all their mobile stuff sort of back in the day. So we're going to talk about kind of 4 different things. First, what is the goal of being a leader? I think it's really important to know, what does success look like, right? Why are we actually doing, why am I leading? What am I doing here? What is the point of what I'm doing? Talk a little bit about sort of types of leadership positions, so different roles and how they're all different, because it isn't just leadership or management. It's not as simple as that. There's a lot of different nuance based on the job. Then we're going to talk about sort of my thoughts around how to build effective teams. And then last of all, sort of talking about your own career and how to sort of with yourself figure out, what are you trying to get out of your career and your job? So I love this quote so much. Treat people if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they're capable of being, right? So this is, to me, this is part of the goal of leadership, is to help people become and do what they should be doing, and like help them get there, right? And help them be the best that they can be. Like that's really what your job is. And so, yeah, this is, I think, when you haven't been in leadership, or honestly, if you're a bad leader, these are what people sometimes confuse being a leader with. So, is the goal of being a leader to make people like you, or is it the opposite? Is it to have people not like you, like to be demanding? Is it, are you just making sure that we ship? Is that it? Is that the job? Like, is that the job description? Build a roadmap, attend meetings, talk to people, write job requirements. Is that what the job itself is? And it's not. I mean, these are parts of the job sometimes, depending on what you're doing. They can be techniques, but these aren't actually what you're trying to do, right? These are things that you might do during the process, but it's not the actual goal. And, to me, the goal of leader, it's to empower teammates to use their talents effectively for the business. And so, and once again, I'm going to get into it and get into this other roles. Like this can be a little different depending on where you are in the org and where you're at in your career and what your background is. But in the end, leadership is really, when we're talking in a business, is about making sure that people are enabled and empowered. That means let them do their jobs, make sure they can actually do their jobs properly. I think that, every decision I try to make in my day-to-day life, if we're going to make a change about, I'm writing a job description, right? I should write one that helps everybody get their job done better and understand what they're doing. If we're going to put in a new policy, it's to make sure, this has to be the goal. This has to be the goal of why you're doing it. And if you're about to do something and you think, wow, this really doesn't help the team use their talents and skills and abilities for the business, then there's no reason to do it. Like, it's a really good North Star to sort of understand what we should and should not be doing. This is an important thing to say, and it's weird that this is controversial. People want to do a good job. That's a principle that I truly believe. Like, yeah, almost nobody. There are psychopaths, but let's take psychopaths out of it. Nobody starts a job with the intention of being ineffective, angry, disempowered, passive aggressive. Now, you probably work with people who have these attributes, right? But they didn't start that way. That's not the way that it's first day on the job and you're just like, oh, I don't want to do any work. I hate everybody. That's like, when that happens, to me, that's leadership's failure. Like, that's a great sign that something is going wrong. And that's if I have somebody on one of my teams who's acting like that, that's my thing to fix. I need to go figure this out. Something is wrong. At some moment they lost a passion, or they felt disempowered is usually the cause. And they don't know what a good job is. That's actually a really common problem, is that people kind of feel unclear about what they should and shouldn't be doing. So like, should I be making this team happy or this team happy? And which one's more important? It's a really common reason why people dislike their jobs. Okay, let's talk about types of leadership positions. So I'm just doing this at the high level, and different countries, different types of organizations have different titles around these. So I'm just kind of grouping them into leader of leaders, manager, and then an individual contributor. And so the difference here is a leader of leaders. So I lead people who work for me, have people who work for them, who have people working for them. So I'm a leader of leaders. And that's a different job than if you have a team of 8 who report to you and you're the direct manager, they're doing day-to-day work. There's different parts to it. So let's just talk. So here at the top, at least in the US, in tech companies, generally the titles up here would be CTO, VP, or directors. Just depends a little bit how you do it. But you are working on the strategy that allows the direct managers to actually do their job. So things like policy matter a lot in these roles. So, what's our deploy policy? How do we, what's our testing philosophy? And, the goal there is to sort of build a pattern that'll work layers below. A manager, this is probably what people think of when they think of management, sort of, is, it can be a tech lead. The title can be manager. It really depends on the organization. But this is somebody who, most of their direct reports are shipping code or writing code or doing testing or doing whatever. But the goal of a manager is to bring clarity and make sure the direction kind of more local for that team is actually happening. So the trains are running on time, kind of thing. And then obviously, so individual contributor, in my mind, even though and this would be a developer, senior individual contributors absolutely must have some of the values and goals of leadership. Because if you're a technical leader in the company, a visionary, you're driving the architecture, you need to understand and empathize and empower teams, right? That's your goal has to align there. If you're more junior, you're just trying to get your pull request merged. But more senior, you definitely need to kind of shift your thinking. So, these attributes of leadership even go all the way, in this sort of hierarchy. I want to talk about some of the other attributes of these different roles. So, a leader of leader, it's a much larger scope of a job. So your impact is larger. And when you're an individual contributor, typically speaking, you're focused more on a direct outcome. On the downside, leader of leaders, things are more abstract. And developers were people who write code. I started writing code. That's how I got into this business. And that's direct, right? You're so used to things that are physical and direct and happen. It's a little more difficult to be in the abstract zone. And there's more unknowns. So by the time a decision's gotten down to an individual contributor, if you've done your job right, I mean, there's technical stuff to figure out, but everything else should have mostly been understood about what success is. But towards the top, it is very vague. You have to figure out a lot of stuff. And I'll get to this one later, but this is true. That you might naively think that like a VP, we just walk around feeling satisfied all day because we're in charge, and that's what that means. But you actually, it's way more difficult to understand, and that where it goes in the next one. When is the org good enough, right? When are my teams happy or satisfied, or it's really hard to know. There's no moment where you're just like, wow, I did it. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about being a leader of leaders, where obviously if you're an individual contributor, you're like, the project launched, or I did this thing, and there's like something physical that comes out. There's actually an output. And a manager is somewhere in between on all of these. But the higher you go up the ladder, the more you're the one having to bring clarity on success. It's on you. Nobody's going to tell you that you did a good job. Flat out, nobody's going to tell you you did a good job. All right, let's talk about what those effective teams look like. These are Google's 5 attributes of effective teams. They hired psychologists and did a whole bunch of work around what does it mean to be an effective team. And I'm going to focus on number 1, actually, but psychological safety. So can you take on risks without feeling like you're going to get embarrassed? So mocking or shaming, those things really make ineffective teams. And these are the things that drive people, by the way, to get into that mode. Or the other things. Can we count on each other? Are the teams dependable? Do you depend on your coworkers? Do we trust each other? Structure and clarity. Are your goals and execution plans clear? Do you know why you're doing the work? And do you know the work matters in the last one? I mean, these seem simple, but like if you put all 5 of these in place, you will have a high performing team. And so, my job from a leader of leaders is to make sure that all of our teams have these. And we're not always successful. This is an impossible thing. It's never just like, check, look, they're dependable. So vulnerability, that is the key leadership technique that I use. And that vulnerability is how you build psychological safety. So if I walk around saying I'm the greatest and I'm the best and I have no flaws, then I'm telling other people that I have similar expectations for them or they're not as good as me. And that is not a way to build psychological safety. So these are the most powerful words for a leader. And it seems, even technical leaders, it seems backwards. Some of the worst people I've worked with are people who will never admit that they don't know something. When you, especially as a senior person, tell somebody you don't know, or you don't have an answer, or you're not sure, you're letting them know it's okay that they also don't know, and we got to go figure that out. So here's an example situation of where kind of the vulnerable version versus the traditional. So the leader, of course, I know, like, you have a really hard technical problem, and the leader goes, yeah, of course, yeah, nope. Yep, I know everything about databases. I've done databases for years. Where probably it's complicated and you haven't spent the time to go figure it out. The vulnerable version is say, I don't know about that, but I bet you can figure it out and tell us about it. That just tells people, like, I'm not the one who's going to do this, and I trust you, right? Here's another one. A junior employee wants to tackle a big project. Traditional is, we only let senior people work on this. It's too important. You might mess it up, and we can't risk that. The vulnerable way is, when I was starting out, I really struggled with a big project. Can you tell me more about how you'd like to solve it? And like, that just opens the door for them to show off and be great, right? That's an enabling statement, not just, yeah, you got to wait, you should be here 6 months before we would trust you. And, maybe in the end, I'm actually saying the same thing, that I might not put you on the project, or maybe you'll blow my mind and be amazing. Let's talk about self-discovery. This is are you sure you want to lead? Because this is what I tell. I've had so many people in my job, say, my career, I think I want to go into leadership. Maybe they're getting to a certain level and they want to, start managing people. And a lot of developers don't enjoy managing. They try it and they don't like it. And the test is, can you value your indirect outputs? So, every day, hopefully, our website gets deployed with small feature changes, bug fixes. And teams are proud of the small things they're doing. I didn't do any of that, but I have to find abstract value that I'm helping them do it. And so, can you wake up excited in the morning without having an actual deliverable, a thing that's like concrete? And it's really a question for yourself. So if you can find it in yourself to value those indirect things, leadership might be a great option for you. And this is a little bit just a kind of high level, way that I think about leadership, which is that you kind of start, I need somebody to have experience being an individual contributor and developer. And at some point, as you get more senior, you kind of go into 2 channels of people leadership and technical leadership. Now, there's overlap between these, but for the roles themselves, what you're focused on is different. One is people and one is the technology itself. And, once again, one has a much more direct output and the other has more abstract. And an important part here that I want to add, and this is something I always focus on, we're always clear. People really, they'll get a promotion to manager, they'll hate it, they'll start hating their job, and then they'll quit because it's too shameful. They got promoted to manager, right? And we want to be really clear, or I always want to be really clear. It's okay. Like, go back to senior IC. Maybe you're technical enough to be a staff. You might be able to transition into that. Like, I would probably transition to an architect role, but it's okay. Like, if you end up not enjoying leading people, that's acceptable. And that doesn't mean you're bad. That doesn't mean you're bad at your job or a bad person. It just means you're probably just not enjoying yourself. And I think no matter what you choose in your career, make sure you're enjoying it. Because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not going to be successful at it. I really believe that if people aren't enjoying what they're doing, they're really going to struggle to give value. Anyhow, that's the end of my talk. I'm ready for questions. Follow me on Twitter at hcatlin. I'm around. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm excited to get some questions.
Awesome. Great. That was quite quick and very insightful information. Lovely. So we have some questions, and okay. First of all, people who are watching, please clap if you like this show. If you like this talk, please do clap. And then let's start with the questions. Okay, so what is the process of transitioning from being developer to a leadership position?
Yeah, so normally the first step is, talk to your manager. So whoever you report to, talk to them. And normally what we do, in most companies, is have a technical lead role. So that'll normally be, maybe your manager has 10 direct reports and there's a smaller team of 5, and you can sort of run the sprints or start doing some certain things, one-on-ones with the team, help to give advice, maybe mentor a more junior developer. So that's typically the path, and it's sort of a taster. So you're not necessarily having to negotiate salary day one, but you can kind of start to take that leadership role. And then normally once you've been doing that for 6 months to a year, depends on how things go. We tend to change the title to manager and then give you more people. And as a percentage, the time that you're coding would slowly go down until you're at my point where it's definitely 0% of my time.
Got it. And what are the skills that people need to learn before actually transitioning there?
Well, I mean, first of all, I believe you need to be a decent developer. So one of the reasons why I always, I don't want somebody to be a junior developer who gets along with people or maybe is outgoing, and then I will make a manager. They're not very good at being a developer. I don't believe you can effectively lead technology teams without having a great sense for technology. It doesn't mean you're obviously not going to be the architect, but you at least need to be, in my mind, what a senior engineer would be. So that's number one. And then number two, I would say, and this is a little more abstract, but practicing empathy. And let me be clear about what empathy is. Empathy, sometimes people think of as sympathy. So you're crying because you feel bad for everyone in the world. No, empathy is when you can understand where somebody else is thinking. So what their thought process is. You can put yourself in their shoes and understand them. That is probably the most valuable skill that you should always be practicing. If somebody is acting in a way that doesn't make sense to you, stop and think about it. Think, why would this person act that way? And that muscle is super useful for leadership, because when I tell somebody they're not getting a raise, right? I need to understand how they're going to hear me, and I need to make sure we're having that conversation in a productive way. I have to understand them. Otherwise, they're going to get angry. They're going to get burned out. They're going to throw things. They might do that anyway, but it's at least minimizes the chance.
Got it. So one benefit that I see, a key benefit people might want to transition into leadership is the benefits it gets you in terms of money. So how much difference is there in the industry when you transition from being a software engineer and following the path, like being just keep being the software engineer, or moving to these other areas, leadership areas?
So in my experience, the pay differential isn't actually that large. It really isn't. Now, that might not be true for all companies, especially the type of company. Client service oriented companies are obviously going to value people who go out and speak or working with clients are going to get valued more. But generally speaking, in product focused companies, I mean, maybe 20% more, if that. But typically, because to us, so like at Google, for instance, their highest pay bands are not, I mean, a lot of them are developers. They're the people who are behind the scenes building out Google Cloud. They are not the titled people necessarily. So, I do not go into it for the money. That is, if I want to be clear also, those senior levels of technology, there's a point where, you can only know so much about code. Like, I think junior developers think that, you'll never know everything, right? But your skills and ability to quickly pick up a new programming language or understand a new paradigm, those can grow pretty quickly. But the real skills what's the difference between a principal engineer and a staff engineer or a senior? Usually those are the ability to drive change, not just in themselves, but around them. And so that's where you're not going to get promoted in my organization to architect unless you are mentoring junior people. You're writing this amazing documentation, training everybody on the coolest, newest tech, and then doing a whole initiative to tackle tech debt. Like, that to me is a type of leadership. And those roles are very extremely well paid. So I would not make the decision. I'd make it off of, what do you actually enjoy? What gets you excited? Because once again, you're not going to go write all that documentation and do all that extra work and put together the training if you're not excited about it.
Right, absolutely. Can you share what was your career path, your first job, and then till now?
Yeah, that's a long one. No, it's funny. The first time I didn't think I'd get into leadership, and I actually kind of fell into it accidentally. So my first job, I was a college dropout, and apparently in the early 2000s, after the dot-com bust, if you don't have a college degree, nobody was going to hire you as a programmer. I found that out late. I ended up getting hired by a small team of people in Toronto, Canada, where I was living at the time. And they brought me on as their first hire of a small development shop. And what ended up happening was there was the managing director of this company. I was the first hire. We grew really fast. That's where I came up with Haml while there in Sass. It's no longer around, but called Unspace. And what actually happened was the managing partner, who's now at Microsoft, is a very senior product person. He left the company to join Microsoft. He's been there for 15 years now, I guess. And I was, I guess, 22, 23. And all of a sudden, none of the rest of the remaining partners had a ton of background in leadership or interest in it. They were more interested in design and being a programmer. So I actually kind of just stepped up into the role of helping to run the business. And that was because I had to. There wasn't, we didn't really have a choice. And so I started building those skills there. It was kind of accidental. Since then, I've gone on to run a bunch of these open source projects. I got, basically by inventing things and putting things online, I got a role as CTO at a company called MoveWeb. It started small. We ended up growing pretty big. But yeah, I've also been founder, CEO of a couple startups. Rent the Runway, it was me kind of coming to a larger organization. We're at over $1 billion valuation right now. It's a much larger organization than the ones I'd been at previously. It's just different. It's different scale, different size. Who knows what's next?
If you need to, let's say, do you want to change anything in this path? What would it be?
I think first of all, y'all might laugh about this. I would recommend getting a career or life coach earlier. I know it's a bit of a goofy thing to admit to, but building confidence and belief in yourself, I think, is the thing that I put out a lot of confident energy. I always have, but I think actually believing in myself behind the scenes and knowing that I can make a difference and I can do this and that I can make the changes I need to make, I guess, you have to have a belief in yourself. Because like I said, towards the top, you get very little positive feedback. To be honest, you really do have to sort of find it in yourself, because especially during challenging times like now, right? People come to you and they're concerned and they have questions and they have things going on in their life, and you have to find a certain strong center place to hold on to. And nobody else is going to do that for you. And honestly, if I had done that, I think I probably would have stuck to one of my earlier startups longer, and it'd probably be a success. So that's what would be different.
Amazing. So I have one last question, and that's related to the theme of the conference, which is pursuit of mastery. So do you have anything do you want to share anything on that topic with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to something I kind of already said, but I believe that all forms of technical mastery need empathy, and programming, it is wrong to think that programming is unbiased and unhuman, that it's somehow mathematics or physics, or that it is unbiased by humans. Like, humans write code. We have our own thoughts. We have our own feelings. And I think no matter where you're at, just admitting to yourself that this is not just some sort of purist, it doesn't exist in the ether concept. Like, our job is taking real problems in the world, building technical solutions to solve them, and doing that with other people. And I think that is something that is often missed, and it's good to just deal with it.
Oh, amazing. Thanks a lot, Hampton, for joining in and sharing this knowledge. I know 30 minutes time is too less. I feel like there are so many questions that I could take advice from you on. And so do you have any last message for the audience, how they can connect with you, or anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, follow me on Twitter. I try to share some of my thoughts about leadership there. And yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out. I'm a real human. I'm happy to help if anybody needs anything, honestly.
Okay, I just remember one more question. Your favorite book?
Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. It's a fantastic book.
Can you spell again?
Cryptonomicon.
Nomicon. Okay.
RYPTO and Nomicon. Yeah, it's about cryptocurrencies, World War II, spies, startups. It's a crazy book. It's great.
Great. Awesome. Thanks again, Hampton, for joining in. See you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.